this evening, and that there aren't too many obstacles left before Sunday, which is when we hope that our hostages will begin to get home. And I remember something that Arlene taught me. She said that Jewish education and Jewish life should be less about oi and more about joy. So I hope we'll have good cause for joy in the coming days. I want to thank Pardes and especially Dr. David Bernstein and all of you for coming. And we're here to honor Arlene's memory. And I want to thank Bracha Tzuriel for bringing delicious refreshments, and for Peggy Brill for coming early to help us set them up. And in a room just across the corridor, there's a meeting going on of Maharat. And one of the, I'm going to call them young women, because they're obviously a different generation than mine, came out, and I said to her, you know, we're doing an Askara this evening for Arlene Agus. She was one of the people who contributed a lot to making Maharat and Drisha and other such programs come into existence. We have many speakers and some musical selections. I will simply say that I met Arlene in 1971, and we weren't always in contact the last few years, but I'm trying, as I think most of us are, to focus on positive memories. And we will most likely hear many of the memories this evening. So first, I'm going to call upon the Tzuriel Zuckerman family, who are well represented here this evening.
All right.
And perhaps we'll begin. Who was Arlene's first cousin.
You're gonna have to leave, yeah, I know. Here, I put the headphones on.
My name is Yitzchak Tzuriel. In my youth, known as Bruce Zuckerman, the first cousin of Arlene Zal. Our mothers were sisters. Yeah, our mothers were sisters. I want to speak about Arlene from the perspective of family. In the very first verses of Sefer Shemot, the Torah tells us how the family of Yaakov became the people of Israel. Ve'ela Shemot b'nei Yisrael habaim Mitzrayma, and it lists the sons of Yisrael, Yaakov, by name. Then it says, U'b'nei Yisrael paru v'yishretzu v'yirbu v'yatzmu b'me'od me'od v'timalei ha'aretz otam. They greatly multiplied, swarmed, filled the land. This is what Yaakov wanted. Not to be in Mitzrayim, maybe, but yes, for his family to grow and multiply and fill the land. And yes, they became a people. But as Rav Adin Steinsaltz Zal states in his wonderful little tract, We Jews, the Jewish people are best defined as a family. The Baalei Tosafot in Tractate Brachot ask about the first blessing that we say in the Amidah. They ask, all the blessings that we say normally include normally include both the name of God and mention his kingship. As we say, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. But this most important blessing that leads off the Amidah of 19 blessings on weekdays and like a locomotive pulls with it the train of all those subsequent blessings, does not mention Malchut. It does not say Melech HaOlam. And Tosfot asks, how could this be? Rather, it says, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu ve'Elokei Avotenu, and then it says Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. The God of each of the forefathers. And they answer. Tosfot give the following answer: that saying Elokei Avraham is tantamount to saying Melech HaOlam, since Avraham was the one who introduced the idea of God's kingdom into the consciousness of universal humanity. But the blessing goes on to address God as the God of Yitzchak and the God of Yaakov. And I think this invites us to consider how every one of the avot somehow represented a step further in defining what it means to understand and accept the sovereignty of God. Yitzchak would represent a step of total acceptance by the individual, as seen when he allowed his father to bind him to the altar. And what about Yaakov? Yaakov understood that the best platform for bringing knowledge of God's kingdom and teachings into the world is through the family. This family of Yaakov, or Yisrael, in a relatively short time, became a very large family. In fact, a nation of 600,000 households. But what's so special about family as the platform for spiritual growth? Well, much of what children learn is through their parents' example of doing. This provides a basis that can be deepened and made richer as the children grow older. Arlene was 5 years older than I. For me, as a child, she loomed large in our extended family. In my memory today, but even all the way back then, Arlene was the shining light in the family, always excited to see you and made you feel the same way about her. She stood out among our generation of 18 first cousins in the Cohen family as the one who always pushed for more family time together, to convene our cousins club, as she called it, and to do things together. She was the one who kept track of everyone's birthdays. In later years, she tragically became distant from the family. But those early years are what I choose to remember, and they were what impacted upon my own development. But most significantly for me personally, Arlene was my Jewish role model. I saw how she was unabashedly proud of being a Jew and unflinchingly devoted to Jewish observance. Seeing her as she lived her life gave me the kind of encouragement to go and continue down the path of Jewish learning, observance, and belief. It was Arlene who nurtured in me that kind of visceral connectedness and that easy sense of this is just the way we do it, that you only get from family. And so looking back, I truly feel that Arlene Zal was a kind of spiritual mother for me. And so it seemed like a very natural thing for me to say Kaddish for her during this year. May her memory be a blessing for us all.
Thank you. I don't know the next two people, so they'll have to get up and introduce themselves. Oh, I know. Okay, you want to, I was gonna call on the children and then you. Oh, you're the child. Okay.
Sick in bed.
This is Brian. Yeah.
Good evening. I'm reading the words of our eldest child, Binyamin, who's known as Benji. He's unfortunately homesick. So, but it was very important for him to say something about Arlene as being a person that was very important to him. So I'm going to read his words, probably not as well as he could do it. As I lie here sick in bed, unable to come to the Askara, I am reminded of Arlene's fitting email to my father, sent almost 30 years ago, soon after I arrived in Manhattan for 3 days of jazz, museums, and visiting family. The email was, "The eagle has landed, has discovered he is not bionic, and has gone to sleep." The very fact that I remember the sentence verbatim is a testimony to Arlene, or cousin Arlene, as we called her, ability to have an impact. There are many things I don't remember, and even if I do, certainly not word for word. I always wondered about autobiographies that quote people are written. Are the authors just making it up, or do they really remember entire conversations? Speaking of which, I have no recollection of Arlene's social activism for the refuseniks, besides a black and white photograph of her holding a sign with Uncle Jay. I think this was before I became an uncle, since I was not yet born. I do, however, remember her larger-than-life presence when meeting her at JFK Airport, where she would always have mini cereal boxes and 6-packs for me and my siblings. Rice Krispies, Frosties with Tony the Tiger on the front, Fruit Loops, Captain Crunch. I remember her approaching us, smiling widely, her effervescent, bubbling personality and total presence, and the delight she had in giving us the neatest gift she could find, like a slinky that she then tried to help us walk down the steps with mixed success, and freeze-dried ice cream that was invented for astronauts. And it had a Hechsher. For some reason, I never saw that product anywhere else. I don't think it took off. That particular part of the airport was cavernous and the light was dim. Remember the TWA terminal? Which did not, in my memory, affect Arlene's glowing presence, which I can compare to flashes of light as I go back through my life's memories. I remember her at her mother's house, joking with Aunt Reva and with her live-in helper, and on the sly in Hebrew, telling me how hard it was to find helpers of high intelligence. I didn't know she spoke Hebrew. Another part of the mystique that surrounded her in my youthful eyes. Besides those brief visits with Arlene as we were coming through New York, the most intense and recent experience with her followed the email, which I mentioned at the beginning. I was 16, and Arlene hosted me graciously in a neighbor's apartment, made me feel totally welcome and at home, took care of all my needs, and helped me find jazz performances given during those 3 days, as well as recommending museums and reminding me that even though it was boiling outside, everywhere you go, the air conditioning is so cold that you need to take a jacket. She helped me decide the orange juice in the refrigerator was bad. It shouldn't be fizzy. Took me for my first pesto pizza, and after going out to dinner with our cousins, told me that the reason our cousin Susan was attracted to her husband Ian was because he's witty, just like Bubba liked Zeta because he was witty. While at the time that seemed like the truth coming from her mouth, looking back, I realized it might just be her opinion. And I wonder how I would have experienced her as an adult. I probably would have enjoyed more how quick and sharp she was. Did she just say that? And that thought leaves me wondering what could have been if only, and also with an inner resolution to show up as myself a little bit more for the people in my family, with more of my vigor and excitement, and to give the gift of my attention and presence to those who I love, just as Arlene did for me.
Sure.
I was gonna ask who Shira is, but now I know. Okay.
And Matt, you just say who you are and what your relationships are with complete start.
So I'm Shira, and Arlene was my
Got to
cousin.
talk louder.
I'm Shira, and Shira used to be Zuriel, Yitzhak's daughter, and Arlene was my cousin, Abba's cousin. So I'm going to speak to Arlene actually, because that's how I wanted to speak. Arlene, my dear cousin that I love so much. My heart knows that you felt the same way about me. Always with your warm, beautiful smile, welcoming us with your boundless love upon arrival in New York or before departure back to Israel. When we met, I always felt so close to you, as if we just saw each other yesterday and we will see each other again tomorrow, as if we were very close in a different lifetime. I wish we had seen each other more over the past recent years. I always had this feeling that one day we would meet for more than a brief airport visit and have all the time in the world to talk about everything, to catch up and fill in all that we missed. I guess that won't happen, not in this lifetime. I always hoped that one day we would talk and figure out everything that wasn't good and make peace with everything and everyone. I guess that won't happen either in this lifetime. But our souls are beyond this lifetime, and God has his ways and his reasons why things are the way they are. Why you never had a family of your own, why so much hardship, why you had to go so soon. I know that you are now at peace, and you can see what we can't see from here. I know you had a lot of important things to do here, most of which I learned about only now, since your passing. There are a few things that I learned about you that poured light for me on the deep soul connection that I feel we have between us. One is that you used your beautiful voice to help connect people to their own prayers, to open their hearts and help them feel closeness to God. Another is that you absorbed from your father melodies, prayers, laning, leading, and learned to pass on this treasure in your own feminine way. But the one thing I was really astonished, emotional, and happy to learn about is your gift to the world of reviving Rosh Chodesh as a women's holiday. I am very connected to Rosh Chodesh, and for years have been organizing and leading Rosh Chodesh gatherings for women in which I led with my voice and guitar the Hallel prayer that we sing together. I feel this to be part of my mission in the world, and I thought you would be as happy as I was to know about this connection between us. I also organize, lead, and am one of the readers in the Women's Megillah reading on Purim in our community. I learned to lane from my father among the many spiritual gifts I absorbed from him. All of these make me feel our special connection in a new way, and now I know for sure you will live in me forever. Your contribution to the world will continue also here in Eretz Israel, through me and through many other women who know the power of prayer and get together on Rosh Chodesh to use it for the sake of our nation, especially in times like this. I will do my best to contribute to the growing of this amazing gathering. As you helped many groups of women to celebrate Rosh Chodesh together, I pray that this beautiful custom will spread its wings all through the Holy Land and bring more and more women together on this special day. I see this as your legacy that is left after you are gone, that will live on and continue to make the world a better place. In the name of the women of Am Yisrael, I thank you for all you have given. I love you forever and will miss the times we never got to spend together. One day we will meet again in heaven. We may not catch up on all we missed, but we just might organize together a big women's gathering and prayer in the heaven halls to celebrate Rosh Chodesh. In your honor, I would like to sing one song from the Hallel prayer. Pitchu li sha'arei tzedek avo pam odeya, ze ashar la'Adonai, tzadikim yavo'u bo. Open for me the gates of righteousness. I shall enter them and thank God. This is the Lord's gate. The righteous will enter therein. With prayers that Hashem's gates will open for you and you will enter with the righteous. Your light will shine in me forever. Nuchi b'shalom al mishkabech. Pitchu li sha'arei tzedek avo pam odeya,
Um, So if you don't mind, Jay, we'll break up the family continuum, Retzev, I don't know how to say that. And we'll have some remarks from a friend. And then we'll come back to you because that will also involve some music, I believe. Okay, Sidra.
I sent in some pictures. I don't know who's in charge of it.
Yeah, we can't use all the pictures that we got. Yeah, we got many, many beautiful pictures, but this is what we have. Yeah.
Thank you, Debbie, for organizing this. And for me personally, it's a sort of sorrowful pleasure to see many people whom I haven't seen for years in the same city, that we live in the same city. And I'm happy that my daughter Talia is here too. I imagine that, like me, most of you have attended more Shiva calls in the past year than you care to recall, for reasons of mortality and of war. But I'm certain that none are like this gathering. Everyone who has spoken or will speak here tonight has presumably wrestled with the same challenge. Having known Arlene over many years, we wish to eulogize the vibrant, beautiful, talented, and oh so promising young woman who came into our lives like a whirlwind, passionate, stentorious, and commanding, and not the isolated, destitute soul who lived and died alone in her New York apartment. So the challenge is how to write about the one without ignoring the other, or how to hold both in our hearts and minds. As we search for a way to articulate our feelings, maybe Jacob's response to Pharaoh's query about his age can give us the language. Vayomer Yaakov el Paro, Yimei shnei megurai 30 u'me'at shana, me'at vera'im hayu yemei shnei chayai, ve'lo hisigu et yemei shnei chayei avotai v'yemei megureihem. The days of the years of my sojourning are 130. Few and evil have been the days of the years of my life, and they have not attained to the days of the years of the life of my fathers and the days of their sojourning. It is hard to parse these words, and commentators have offered different interpretations, and I'm sure many of you have your own interpretations. Jacob lived, according to the Pshat, till the age of 130, older than Moses. That is, his sojourn on earth, his actuarial age, was 130 years. But the days of the years of my life, that is, those years that matter, that are determinative of a sense of destiny, purpose, and nachas, as he nears the end, were, in his reckoning, few and evil. We understand this as an allusion to that excruciating period during which Jacob mourned Joseph, the beloved son of his beloved Rachel, whom he presumed dead. Years passed in the evil grip of bitterness and an inconsolable sorrow. But it was not always thus for Jacob or for Arlene, who in her prime, when I, like many of you, first met her, was truly larger than life. Sam Norwich concluded his remarks at the memorial service in New York this way. Arlene was a rising star in the last 3 decades of the 20th century. The 21st century has not been as kind to her. So let me return briefly to the 20th century, and so far those who have spoken before me have already done that, and I assume others will too. And for me, more precisely, to sometime in the mid-1980s. My first glimpse of Arlene was at a summer retreat of the Chavurah, where she directed the chorus. Her beaming face and heavenly voice, along with her humor and charisma, have never left me. Look at me, she told the alto section that I had joined. I'm your best friend. Indeed, that was true for many years. And I wanted to share with you a few photos from a surprise Halloween birthday party, 50th birthday party that Arlene hosted for me in her apartment in 1992, but these pictures will have to suffice. But then things began to go downhill. There were acts of trespass on her part, unsolicited advice or castigation she insisted on articulating at crucial crossroads in my life that made it impossible for me to continue the friendship. I'm sorry to admit that by the late 1990s, I could no longer maintain contact with her, although I received updates from those who remained loyal. And I contributed, like many of you, to the Matan Beseter, the collection of funds to help her manage when her resources ran out. That Kupat Tzedakah was indeed a global reservoir created by community leaders and educators like Professor Alice Shalvizal, who had been touched by Arlene's charisma, her beauty, and her devotion to a form of liberal, liberating Judaism and women's privileged place therein. Arlene's self-isolation was alleviated by that kuppah and by the few remaining friends who refused to let go, along with the mercy of Jewish institutions like Hatzolah in New York City. I suspect I'm not the only one in this gathering and in other places in the world who never stopped mourning during the evil days of the years of her life for the loss of the Arlene we loved. Unlike so many other Shiva experiences, when one arrives full of sorrow and cherished memories, I suspect that many arrived here tonight full of the sense of hachmatzah, of a poor soul who missed out on the harvest of those early years of bloom and promise. As the news of her lonely death, so expected and yet so shattering, affected all of us viscerally, we want to cling to the belief that there is chesed shel rachamim, a kind of heavenly compassion that comes to us all in our hour of need. It is, I guess, small comfort to tell ourselves and each other that Arlene is no longer suffering. One thing is certain, the void she left over the years in the lives of many is enormous. Shetanuach al mishkava b'shalom.
Thank you very much. I want to read something that Sharon Shumack sent me. And it's about a period in Arlene's life that some of her friends here didn't know about. In the very early 1970s, probably fall of 1970 or 71, when I happened to be visiting New York. I had the honor of observing Arlene at work at a school in Brooklyn, I think, for severely disabled children. I don't know how long she held that position and can't remember why she asked me to accompany her to her job that day. I assume it was a job, as she was familiar with the children, but now I'm wondering whether she may have been there as a volunteer. For me, it was startling simply to be in that large room full of children with such serious physical and mental handicaps. It was deeply moving and instructive to observe the patience, respect, and caring that Arlene demonstrated as she attempted to teach or assist them. The surroundings were very bleak, but Arlene's huge smile and profound demonstration of chesed brought warmth and light into that crowded, noisy, and cheerless space. I learned a lot about compassion that day by watching Arlene interact with fragile children who lacked mobility, language, or control over the movement of their limbs. In retrospect, I believe that what has remained for me an unforgettable moment when I witnessed Arlene in that classroom over 50 years ago was emblematic of the deep focus and kavanah that she brought to each human connection and to her commitment to repair the world. Zichrona livracha. I will now call upon Jay Zuckerman, who's the brother of Yitzchak Zuriel, and therefore another first cousin.
Yes, many of my memories of Arlene, the Arlene that we knew back then, were of somebody who was, as everybody has already said, some people have said how talented and beautiful, outgoing, full of charisma Arlene was, and the music was very much a part of it. And one of my big connections with Arlene was through the music. We used to sing together. She taught me songs. So through the evening, I'm going to play a couple of songs that she taught me. I think I just want to start. Oh, we have sung one thing already, but I'm going to start with the song that they sang at the funeral. That's reflective of the time. A song that Ofra Chaza apparently made famous after the Yom Kippur War, and I think also reflects a lot about what this whole country is feeling right now. All העולם כולו ישב צר מאוד, ישב צר מאוד, ישב צר מאוד. ישב צר מאוד. לא לפחד כלל והעיקר לא לפחד עולם ישב צר מאוד, ישב צר מאוד, ישב צר מאוד. כל העולם כולם ישב צר מאוד, ישב צר מאוד. לא מפחד כלל והעיקר One more reflection now. One of my first memories of Arlene is when she came back from a trip to Israel. I think it might have been her first trip to Israel. She, I believe it was a concert tour with the Zamir Chorale. Arlene joined the Zamir Chorale, I think it was in 1968 or 69 with Stanley Sperber was the conductor in New York. What's that? Oh, 66, 66. Stanley Sperber was the conductor, and we used to sing things together from Zamir. And actually, I also sang with Stanley Sperber at one point, but 15 years later in the Reuben Academy Choir here in Jerusalem. But what I'd like to play now is a selection from this that we used to sing in Zamir, and any people from former Zamir chorale people who know. So you can sing along. I'm going to play, what's that? Oh, here, the Rasi Hallelujah. And I'd like to also mention that if you think about the words of this Psalm, Psalm 146, of course, Solomon Rasi they just celebrated the 400th year of his Kantiki Tantikorim, the cycle of songs that he wrote for the synagogue. This was one of the ones we used to love to sing, the Hallelujah. So Eddie, you're welcome to sing your part. And if you, I see there's a bunch of Zamirniks, former Zamir chorale people. So I'm going to connect it to this Bluetooth here. Let me just connect to the Bluetooth. Maybe I'm not connecting Bluetooth. Yeah. I'm singing bass. Okay. Ready? Okay, so let's start. Okay. So, where are we? Here we go. So we're going to play this is a Josh Jacobson's Josh Jacobson from Boston made this version.
Nobody can hear you. Jay, you need to speak into the microphone,
Okay.
both for us and. for
Okay. Yeah. So this is a version of Josh Jacobson from the Boston Zamir. Is it? Hallelujah, Shietadon, Hallelujah, Bechayai, Bechayai. Place to something happened. Something wrong with the recording. Middle. Oh, the recording is funny. Can't pick up. And the rain. Maybe I'll just stop this. It's pause. Adonai Malki
Asurim Adonai Achivim Adonai Et Kefufim Adonai Ohev Tzadik Shomer et Gerim Yatom ve'almana Yeoded Bederet Resha'im Ve'avet Imloch Adonai Dor Vador Yeah, not yet. Yeah. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Well, we still did better with the acapella. This thing came out real funny. I don't know. It's fine when I did it at home. But anyway, I just wanted to finish this last thing, but just say that thank you for all of you. But well, none of us, I guess, are the conductor. Those words also bring to mind Arlene, the words of the psalm about Shomeret Gerim Yatom ve'Amoded Yeoded V'der B'Sha'im Tzaddik Tzaddik. You know, it's also about Arlene. So maybe thank you. We're going to come back to more music.
Yes. Jay will be back with more music as we continue. And I just have to say that Arlene and I were very, very close friends for over 30 years, but I actually never heard her daven. In other words, I never attended a service that she led. And I think in retrospect, it's my loss. She did teach me how to sing the trup for Megillat Echa. So and I've taught that to some other people. So to this day, in our shul at least, we preserve that legacy of Megillat Echa. Okay. I am very honored to call upon, I'm gonna say Yitz and Blue, because I think that's how Arlene would have referred to them. Rabbi Yitzhak Irving Greenberg and Blue Greenberg. And I'm so glad that you could come this evening and you can speak in any order that you choose. I think, yeah, okay. Good. Thank you. We share one watch. Sorry, Yitz, can you give me your watch? Oh, you know. Thank you. Loud. It's fair to say that Arlene Agus was not well known in the wider community, though given the obituaries that have been placed in major Jewish publications recently, she's better known now than she was 30 days ago. Still, it's not commensurate with the contribution to Jewish life in the 20th and 21st centuries and continuing that Arlene Agus made to the world. And I would add, without any fanfare.
In the interest of time, I'm going to select a few stories specific to my relationship with her that are characteristic of the unique nature of Arlene. She changed women's lives and changed the course of Judaism. And with a particular incident, she changed the course of my life for the ensuing 50 years. Though she was never one to take credit or want credit for that or for anything. And I'll return to that incident at the end of my remarks. She also made another huge contribution beyond women's roles in Judaism. She was an extraordinary model of reaching across the lines of an interdenominational activist in Nezrat Nashim, in Rosh Chodesh, in her teachings, in her davening, in all the organizations that she created, enterprises that she created. And if not for Arlene, I think women would have done their work separately in their denominational corners and been the poorer for it. Many have spoken about the Rosh Chodesh groups, and that's gotten a lot of publicity. She was the recreator of Rosh Chodesh as a women's holiday. She took a small chelik out of the original playbook, the rabbinic text, and she defined it for this generation of feminism and women's equality. But she went a step further from beyond the conceptual framework, and that is she created the groups herself. And I had the good fortune to be part of one of the first groups, and that group has lasted until today. That's 35 years ago. I got a call from Arlene inviting me to the apartment of Frances Hurwitz, whom I did not know, on Central Park and West 74th Street. Arlene knew her from Minyan Ma'at. And there were a very special group of women there. And the meetings, Arlene used to bring a candle and light a candle in honor of Rosh Chodesh, which was very unique to our particular group. When the apartment belonged to a city college, a graduate school, and Frances was the president. And when she gave up the position, we then moved to Frances's apartment, occasionally to the apartment of Rabbi Rachel Cowan. And it's remarkable that the group is going on as, it's not Rosh Chodesh, but when it's Rosh Chodesh, the group is meeting. And this was all from Arlene's initiative. Second incident, second enterprise. Sometime during the 80s, Arlene convened a small group of women, I think 6 or 7, and I can't put my hands on the record, from different denominations, a mix of scholars and activists or both. We met for several months on the Upper West Side. Arlene's idea and initiative was to create a non-denominational rabbinic school for women. It was really quite amazing. At those meetings, we had discussions of what text would be appropriate for the group to study together, and what sessions and classes would be best designated for a particular interest group. Arlene even picked out which teachers should teach in she had the playbook all worked out, but she did this very subtly because we all thought that we were doing all this creative work, and then at some point realized that this was, in her mind and on her pad. For months before we actually met. For some reason, the group disbanded after several months or a year, but I really cannot wait for Arlene's archives to be opened. There are boxes and boxes of paper in her apartment of meetings and ideas, and it's probably the best record of Jewish feminism and Jewish and Soviet Jewry, early Soviet Jewry, interdenominational crossovers, renewal, Aguna activism, women's prayer, etc. of those years. Unbeknownst to many, Arlene directed a foundation in memory of a Jewish woman who had died fairly young. It was a modest fund. Arlene made significant contributions from that fund to fledgling organizations. I recall in the early days of JOFA, the Jewish Orthodox Feminist Alliance, a check arrived, I think it was $2,000, which was a lot of money for us at the time, from the Paretsky Foundation. We had to track it down because there was no signature of Arlene anywhere. And she wasn't waiting for a thank you. She never sought any special thanks for her work. She loved her Judaism and everything Jewish. She was raised in an Orthodox home, as you all know, educated in an Orthodox day school, and maintained an Orthodox way of life all her days, even as she transitioned in affiliation to renewal and interdenominational Jewish institutions, such as Minyan Ma'at. And she did so without rejecting her past, even as she embraced liberal Judaism. She was truly this model of interdenominational respect, which was not a common commodity then, nor now for that matter. She was never afraid to be the first to jumpstart and into a stream, and she always wanted to share what she experienced. I remember seeing her in a talit for the first time. Do you remember that talit?
Yes.
Which she made herself, and she was very proud. When I complimented her, she asked me if I would like her to teach me how to make one. I'm sure she taught many women how to make a talit and probably made a few for others as well.
Excuse me. Her talit was on display in several Jewish museums around the world
You know that?
and was a kind of a model or an inspiration for many women, including in Israel, and not only in Jerusalem, but in Yerucham, to make their own talitot.
Sorry, that's good. Good to know. Arlene was a great friend, and it was a guilt-free relationship. You could forget to include her in some event in which she should have been included, and she dismissed your apology and never took it to heart. As was characteristic of her throughout her life, she only wanted to give and not to receive. Unfortunately, that persisted till the end of her life. But a friend of Arlene's was a friend for life. She cared deeply and genuinely about her friends. Before we made Aliyah, Yitz and I would visit Israel once or twice a year. I always tried to visit Alice Shalvi on those visits, a friend of many years. Arlene loved Alice dearly, and it was mutual. And on one of those visits, some 12 years ago or more, I received a call from Arlene with some urgency in her voice. She had tracked me down in Jerusalem and said I should visit Alice. And I told her that I had already visited Alice on this trip. And she said, never mind my rule, only one visit on these short trips, that Alice was going to have some surgery or whatever it was, and I should forget my quota of one visit per person. It was the same with children of her friends. They literally became Arlene's friends. Our children loved when she visited us for Shabbat, always bringing some ingenious puzzles or games, or somebody spoke about the game and that she brought, and we experienced those. I also loved when she came because she was the full entertainment of our 5 young children. And she did establish relationships with our children that went way beyond their childhood. When I shared with my children a few weeks ago the sad news, my daughter Deborah wrote back, or emailed back how sorry she was, how sad she was, and that they all loved her. And she signed off with a poem that Arlene had taught her over 50 years ago. One hen, 2 squawking geese. I don't know if some of you know that poem. It was actually what was the name of that comedian again who wrote? Okay, I thought it was an ancient poem from England or something, but it turned out it was a modern comedian. Anyhow, Deborah told me that after that email, she told me that whenever she would see Arlene as an adult at a communal event, Arlene would always start the conversation with 1 hen, 2 squawking geese, etc. She had a relationship with all of our children, and in searching my computer for memories of Arlene, I was very surprised to find her name in her son JJ's phone book under speed dial. I think I've exceeded my 5 minutes. I can use your 5 minutes. I think I exceeded your 5 minutes.
She's entitled.
Okay, she's entitled. We all know that, and everyone has spoken about the sad periods in her life. And Arlene was beautiful and popular, had lots of dates. She had a gorgeous voice. She had those shining eyes and bright smile. But she was sad in that she never found real love. She never found love. It was actually a case of unrequited love in her life. She loved a man and he did not love her back, and she would not settle for anything else or for anyone else. And that's why she remained single all of her life, not by choice, but by circumstance. And secondly, she had very dark periods of isolation, all throughout, even periods when all seemed well. I came across a letter in my files that was written on Arlene's behalf to the president of the seniors home where her mother spent her dying days or dying month. It was a letter requesting that Arlene be allowed to sit with her mother, to hold her hand without supervision of the staff. It was a letter which expressed Arlene's apology for getting into a verbal scuffle with some members of the staff, which she did out of agitation that her mother, her beloved mother, was dying, her mother who she cared for all of her mother's life, and especially at the end. But it was a heartfelt plea just to be with her mother so that her mother would not die alone. And she would hold her mother's hand and stroke her mother's forehead just so that her mother would not be alone. And it seems so unfair that Arlene died alone without someone to hold her hand and stroke her forehead and tell her how much we loved her in her lifetime. In her, I wanted just to share with you the two incidents, personal incidents. In the 70s, I was writing articles for Hadassah magazine, which was a very good venue. And one of the articles was on the Jewish family and on declining, and I talked about the declining Jewish population, a surplus of women and a shortage of men. And I suggested that the community should encourage women to help single women have a child. This was in the 1970s. And the editor of Hadassah, as well as some of my friends, thought that that was too radical a thought to put out there, no matter that, I believed in it. And I showed it to Arlene. I was about to scratch it, and I showed it to Arlene, who was a single woman who loved children dearly. And she encouraged me to put it in, and she said, it doesn't matter if I get flack for it. Some women will take it to heart and maybe have a child and have happiness. And so I left it in. Hadassah got no negative response from it. And I felt very good that it was included. And I always appreciated that. But here's how she changed my life and the course of my life. I wasn't an identifiable feminist in the early 1970s. And I think Yitz was. And at any rate, one Sunday, Arlene came with another friend, Toby Brandress, to invite Yitz to participate in a conference that Arlene had been working on for many weeks or months. And they were inviting him to participate in a session, a panel on Sunday. It was a Shabbaton and Sunday. And so Arlene and Toby Brandress came to invite Yitz to speak on the panel on Sunday with Dr. Sam Klagsbrun and Rabbi Saul Berman. Anyhow, during the course of the conversation, I was in the living room listening to the conversation. During the course of the conversation, I went upstairs to put our youngest child, who was then 5, to sleep. And I did so with the Shema, as we always did. And by coincidence, just that week, we had gotten the recording of the Hasidic Folk Festival of that previous year festival. And there was a new melody on it. And so I said to her, before we said Shema, I said, Woody, let's sing Shema with a new melody, which we all love, and we did. And then as I was leaving the room, I heard this little voice behind me. Ima, now can we sing the real Shema? So I'm glad you're laughing because I thought that was very funny. And I went downstairs immediately and did what any good Jewish mother would do, which was tell her guests, and of course her father, this chachma.
Into the microphone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyhow, everybody laughed. And then Arlene spontaneously reached forward and said to me, "Say, Blue, how would you like to be the keynote speaker at this conference on Friday night?" And I thought this was a conference of 25 hardcore feminists. But I said, sure, why not? And then the next morning, Arlene called to tell me that another woman had been invited, a very prominent woman, and she did not want to share the platform with me, keynote platform with me. And would I mind giving a workshop? And I said, sure, why not? A few weeks later, which was a few weeks just before the conference, Arlene called again and said, famous Dr. Actually, Trudy Weiss Rosemary decided to skip the conference altogether. Would I mind giving the keynote address? And I said, sure, why not? I had no idea that this was to be a major conference. And it was actually the event that changed my life for the next 50 years. And I addressed the topic of what's my title again? Is feminism good for the Jews, right? And I gave a yes, good and no good in some ways. At any rate, my talk was published in Hadassah magazine. And I really changed the course of my life and devoted the next 50 years to Jewish feminism, particularly Orthodox feminism. And by the way, that conference was 500 women, not 25 women, 500 women and one man, because we didn't know that men were not invited to these conferences. So Yitz went with me, and he was the one man sitting behind a mechitza the whole Shabbat. And the other thing about the conference was, when I went to the Tefillah on Shabbat morning, I walked in and I heard a nightingale singing. I had never heard a woman leading the davening. It was a nightingale, as you've all spoken of her voice. And she did the laning and she did the davening, and it was transport, whatever the word is. She transported everyone. I also met and listened. She had been very involved in planning this conference. And I learned so many things, including the fact that she was in her 20s at the time, and she was a major organizer of this conference. She put it all together, and it was an eye-opening experience for me to see that a 26-year-old or 25-year-old really could do such a thing. And it was, so like everyone else, I feel so sad that I didn't have a chance to tell her how important she was to the Jewish people and to the Jewish community and to Judaism and to women. And she wouldn't have wanted to hear it. And I feel so bad that I heard the circumstances of her death. I feel bad that I often dialed her phone and I let it ring and ring and ring, and she wouldn't pick it up. But when she would call me on my birthday, which she never missed, or JJ's yahrzeit, we had these wonderful conversations. It was like two different people. I would have really liked to have expressed more appreciation and told her that I cherished her friendship and felt great gratitude for it and feel great gratitude for it. I think I would have apologized. No, I think I would not have apologized, because I know she didn't want any apologies. She wanted only to do things for other people.
And our family, Arlene is a heroine for all these years, for the reason that you just heard, that she really introduced Blue into the world of feminism, Orthodox traditional Jewish feminism. That, and of course, again, she didn't make Blue into the feminist, but she opened that door, brought her into that world, and then in Blue's typical style, she threw herself into preparing that talk and turned into a major assessment, both of the strength and weakness of feminism and of her, and it lit that fire that kept her going for the rest of her life. So Arlene was always really one of the heroes in our heroes gallery in our family's life. So I want to just add, that's why I felt Blue should be the speaker. And I just want to add one other comment, which is she was a friend, a remarkable friend. And all those years, she would come visit. As Blue mentioned, she engaged our children profoundly. But she was a friend, and I think this role of friend is particularly important when you pioneer, when you're trying to develop something that hasn't been done before. Of course, I get a lot of pushback and a lot of hostility and a lot of criticism. And Arlene, sort of just by being there, just by being a friend, taking it normally, taking it in stride, or don't let it throw you, don't let it excite you, don't let it deter you. This is just normal, and this is the way the world is, but this is what you have to do. That was an amazing and ongoing contribution, and I think it helped both of us, but certainly Blue, sort of to go through that without being, as I said, either silenced or intimidated. So that debt of gratitude and that contribution of enriching our lives is something which we will never forget.
Thank you very much, Blue and Yes. I'm gonna ask Jay to come up again and continue with some music.
What?
There's laundry on the bed.
Do a few less. I didn't do as much as maybe 2 phones
Okay,
because I was having.
great.
Laundry is in the front.
Yeah. Of course, one of the times when family gets together is Pesach. And
Video from
we
Jerusalem,
remember,
but Arlene.
Fritz and I both remembered one specific
I'll do it later.
that we had in Brooklyn at Arlene's family, where we learned a lot of the melodies
What
that
you,
we sing to
Deb,
this
what you
day.
should be eating is
And,
chicken soup that
I'm just
Arlene,
gonna,
that
in the interest of time, I'm not
Sharon
gonna
just
I'm gonna
made.
do like 3 or 4 songs.
When
I
it's
got
on
out
the
just to do
stove in the pot.
2
You
things.
can just warm it up.
That the first one
That's the
we
thing
learned
for
from
you.
that. I think it was that Layla Seder. Sing that.
It's milchik.
Ya di khalu abatana di ara de Mitzrayim.
The spoons are in the drawer down below.
All the things you be all the things you be all the things you be all the things they say be Adata Kalishana Badara Israel Ajada Abdel Shana עכשיו, היו עוד כמה דברים, אבל נתמקד במשהו well, I'm sorry, Hebrew, English. I had a few other ones, but I'm going to just take the one that I remember that Arlene taught me. She sent me a tape of this. Is the Echad Mi Yodea in Yiddish. And do you know this one? Wirken zocken, wirken reden, was ist ein Bateich, was ist ein Bateich, ist der Gott, in Gott seiner, und weiter kein Was wirken zocken, wirken reden, was ist zwei Bateich, Zwei is de lichtes en ene is der Gott, en Gott is einer, und weiter keiner. Was up, Rois, Rambedia, werken Sorgen, werken Röden, was ist Reiberteich, was ist Reiberteich? Drei is de Bis und zwei is de lichtes en einer is der Gott, en Gott is einer. Und weiter keiner. Was up, Rois, Rambedia, werken Sorgen, werken Röden, was ist Vierbeteich, was ist Vierbeteich? Vier is de Mammes und drei is de Uves und zwei is de Liches und einer is der Gott und Gott is einer und weiter keiner. Acharon. Was up, mit die Werken sollten wissen, was ist Windbeteich, was ist Windbeteich. Vier is de Teure und vier is de Mammes und drei is de Uves und zwei is de Liches und einer is der Gott. And God is einer and weiter keiner. Of course, it goes on, but in the interest of time, it seems that, one of the Jewish things that happens is that all the songs at the end seem to go on and on, repeating themselves with very long things to make sure that you stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning. Otherwise, you haven't had a Seder. Anyway, that was the way with the Seders were also with Arlene. And okay, so maybe I'll just do, instead of having another, I'll do one other song that, not from the Seder, one other song that Arlene taught me. That actually, I don't even know what the relationship is to anything, but she sent me a tape of this. I think it's in a way a children's song, but it's about, the theme is about peace, so I'm going to sing it. I'm going to teach you a new word today, and you'll repeat after me and say, in English, the word is peace. In English, the word is peace. I'm gonna teach you a new word today, and you'll repeat after me and say, in Hebrew, the word is shalom. Everybody. In Hebrew, the word is shalom. In English, the word is peace. I'm gonna teach you a new word today, and you'll repeat after me and say, in Arabic, the word is salam, and in Hebrew, the word is shalom, and in English, the word is peace. I'm gonna teach you a new word today, and you'll repeat after me and say, in Spanish, the word is paz, and in Hebrew, the word is shalom. Salam, so we got Arabic. The word is salam, and in English, the word is peace. I'm gonna teach you a new word today, and you'll repeat after me and say, in Russian, the word is mir. In Russian, the word is mir. I'll just do the last two. I'm gonna teach you a new word today, and you'll repeat after me and say, in Japanese, the word is hayawa. In Japanese, the word is hayawa, and in Russian, the word is mir. And in Spanish, the word is paz. And in Arabic, the word is shalom. Shalom, and in Hebrew, the word is shalom, and in English, the word is peace. Now that you've learned the word of the day, everywhere that you go now, you will say, Hayawa, here, salam, shalom. It's
Thank you, Jay. That was lovely. And I so appreciate that you sang something in Yiddish, because one of the things I owe to Arlene is meeting the Norwich family. And I see that Sam Norwich is on this Zoom. Maybe Anita is too. I don't know if we have everybody on the one screen, but So, Shenem Dank. Okay, I'm gonna call on Ed. Yep,
I'll stand.
okay. They should see you.
They can, if they, you can turn the thing. They all know what many of those people know. What I look like. It's, I gotta miss. Chavirot, משפחה of, של Arlene, חברה של Arlene, מכובדיי. I'm just going to give a few impressions of that remain with me of several good years when Arlene and I were very close friends in New York. I davened at Minyan Ma'at from the beginning. I don't recall that if Arlene was there at the very beginning, but she and I did many davenings. Shared many davenings together and Torah readings together. And it was mentioned before how beautifully she davened. And you may ask yourselves, how is it, that a woman who is from and who regarded herself as, Shomeret Mitzvot and Orthodox, how is it, that she could daven as a Shlichat Tzibur? And I enjoyed her davening many times and many long davenings on the Yamim Noraim in New York. So how could it be that such a person who was actually rigidly from, I would even say, could allow herself to daven? Now, we had many conversations. We were, both kind of, fun people in those days, at least, but we were also serious people. And we had a number of conversations about that. And she had a shita, right, which is that she was being pre-halachic. Many people have described, how, they're ahead of their time or something. Nobody's ahead of his or her time. You're at your time. Okay, but she was in her time, but she had this shita of being pre-halachic, understanding that yes, what she was doing was not currently the halacha, but it was going to be the halacha, but in her mind, it was all part of the halachic framework. Another aspect of Arlene. She described herself, to me, there was many things that she did as a shomer mitzvah, but some things she didn't do. And that's because she defined herself halachically as an istanis. Okay, what is an istanis from the Greek? And I Googled it in Hebrew, and I'll tell you only one of the definitions that speaks to me at least about Arlene. Hu Adam Mifunak ve'adin hanirta mikol davar sheyesh bo gasut o keur. Do I have to? I don't think in this place that I need to translate.
Well, maybe.
But
Friends in New York.
for the Zoom, okay, she recoiled from anything that was base, that was coarse, or that was ugly. And I don't think that she saw, things as being ugly. She saw them, as being part of God's creation, and everything deserved a respect and embrace. Here's another aspect of Arlene. Where Minyan Ma'at eventually moved was to the congregation Anshe Chesed on West End Avenue at the corner of 100th Street on the west side. Okay, in order to get to that shul, depends where you go from. If you were going directly from our apartment, you stay on West End Avenue. But if you were somewhere before, or it was a chag, or it was a fast day, and she might have been coming from another direction, she would always avoid going up from Broadway.
Why would she avoid going from Broadway? Because there was a diner on the corner. And because maybe someone she knew or knew her would be sitting and eating in that diner on Shabbat or Chag or fast day. And I'm now going to read you something else I was able to copy right out of Google. The Masechet Ketubot, Misupar al ha'amora mar ukba v'ishto, שהסתתרו בתנור לוהט כדי להקפיד על מתן צדקה בסתר ולמנוע מעני שקיבל ממנו נדבה lirot oto, shema yitbayesh. This rabbinic figure in the Talmud put himself in a terrible situation in order that someone that he had given money to would not see that he was there. Al halbanat panim ne'emar, noach lo adam she'apil atzmo lekivshan ha'esh, v'al yalbin pnei chavero barabim, v'gam kol hamalbin pnei chavero barabim ki'ilu shofech damim. It's a terrible sin to embarrass another person, to cause them to be ashamed. And Arlene avoided that as part of the halachic and you might say musaric person that she was. And I'll just end with my sharpest memory of Arlene. And that isn't in one of the many deep conversations that we had, and it wasn't, in shul, right? It was dafka outside shul, where Minyan Ma'at would customarily have an all-night tikkun Leil Shavuot where we would study, and I would usually teach something. She would teach something. Some other people would teach something. We had snacks to keep us awake, and we would daven quickly at the end, and then we would go home and sleep for a while. And then in the early afternoon, we would meet down in Riverside Park and have a picnic and set up a net, to play volleyball. And what I remember best is a very long game of frisbee that we had, and I still see her, standing up, on the slope, going up toward Riverside Drive of Riverside Park, and I'm a little farther below, and I don't know for how long, but for a very long time, we were smiling, happy, and throwing frisbee together. That's what I remember.
Thank you. Yeah, Toby?
Paraphrase Noah Rabin. I didn't come here to talk about the icon of religious femininity. I came to talk about my friend Arlene. We met in Camp Columbia in 1961, but for some reason we weren't in the same division. That is, she was the Scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz, and I had 2 lines and a song in the Flower Drum Song. We met again in Zamir a few years later, but she could still quote her lines from the play. She also knew all the music by heart, sometimes all the other parts, as well as our own soprano melody. And we like to position ourselves in the middle of the choir so we could hear all the parts at once. Also to be closer to the cute tenors and basses, one of whom I married. After college graduation, Arlene got a job as a music teacher. I remember being amazed that she was teaching clarinet without having any idea how to play one. But she was always one to take a leap. And I guess I should have known then what a gifted teacher she was to become. She loved my children, always bought them and me the most amazing gifts, and played with them with infinite patience. And of course, they loved her back, and they're here now too. She took each one to FAO Schwartz and posed with them in a pile of stuffed animals and bought them one to take home. Even as adults, when they were in New York, they never failed to call her. After I moved here, in the years before the telephone was invented, we corresponded by blue airmail letters, by cassette tape, and even once by telegram. No, not that telegram. On my birthday, she sent one that said, "From milk and cookies to milk and honey, Happy Toby Shvat. My birthday is not in Shvat, but it sometimes comes out the same as we know. And Arlene loved parties, and especially poorer parties where she went all out on creative costumes. And if you could show the pictures that I brought, you would see some very strange vampire lady. On one of her visits to Israel, she planned to make herself a birthday party. Since she was born on March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, she brought with her a pile of green Hallmark plates, napkins, and balloons adorned with shamrocks and "Kiss Me, I'm Irish." She never did make the party, and all that stuff has remained in my house for years. But I brought with what's left with them to share with you on the table with the cake. And one story about the religious feminist anyway. Way back when, John, thinking he was being solicitous, asked Arlene if she wanted someone to make Kiddush for her. Her reply, "I'm someone," has stayed with him to this day. After finally agreeing to use WhatsApp, which she relentlessly called WhatsApp, Arlene called me just a few weeks ago, and we had what had become our usual conversation. I would tell her what was going on in Israel and with my family, and she would tell me hardly anything. I knew she wasn't well, but it never occurred to me that this was to be our last conversation. Arlene, I hope you're at peace now. Please, please don't give the Kaddish Baruch Hu a hard time. I'll miss you.
Thank you.
See how short I was too.
I didn't know when I made the list of speakers that this would be the last presentation, but it's so appropriate. I also don't want anyone to be frustrated or upset. So if there's somebody who hasn't spoken, who feels the urge to do so, now is the time. Good, okay. You want to say a few words? Good.
My name is Gilad, and I'm Toby's son and John's son. Toby just spoke, so she was a childhood friend of Arlene. Sorry, I didn't actually write anything, so excuse me. When I came in tonight, I was sort of thinking that my sisters and I, who were also here, would be the representative of the young generation, and how happy I am to see and to hear how Arlene affected other of my generation, the children of that. It's not something that you might expect. As a kid, I think when Arlene or when an adult is playing with you, when you're a kid, you're not burdened by anything that has to do with that person. You're not interested in what their job is or what their accomplishments are or anything like that. You're just having fun. And Arlene was fun. And she was, she always had a way of trying to bring me into her world, asking me adult questions, even when I was a child, really interested in my opinion on things that were interesting to her. And I was a kid, and I was always a kid. Even as an adult, I was a kid, and I didn't always respond in kind, and I wasn't sure what she wanted from me really most of the time. But she never forgot a birthday. I always got an email from her on her birthday, on my birthday, and yeah, and for me too, I also feel like I lost a friend, and it's sad. Even, you know, a lot of people here have spoken about how unfortunate the final years of her life were. And again, as a child, I wasn't aware. I admit I wasn't aware. But one thing that I read recently after she had already died is that she somehow came up with a ceremony or something about to alleviate guilt from children, the parents, parents who passed, and I don't know if anybody else read that. I saw that. So maybe that's something that we can all do individually. And, you know, sorry, Arlene, that I wasn't there for you, that I didn't answer your latest email. But, you know, c'est la vie. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Joel, please.
I thought we might just end, I'll read a few psukim. And anybody who would like to stand up and say Kaddish to Rabbanan afterwards, please join me. And I also want to add that I'm saying this for my mother. This is her 20th yahrzeit. She died at age 99.
Wow.
And was a terrific woman. I also want to thank Debbie for organizing this and running this and doing this all. They really appreciate it. Karachem av al banim, ken tarachem Adonai aleinu. Adonai hayeshua al amcha birchatecha sela. Adonai tzvot imanu miskav lanu. Elohei Yaakov sela. Adonai tzvot ashrei adam boteach bach. Adonai Oshia hamelech yanenu v'yom korenu. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, ויעמד דברה קהילותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה תאמירן ביעלמה ואמרו אמן. על ישראל ועל רבנן ועל תלמידי הון ועל כל תלמידי הון ועל כל מן תעסקים באורייתא דביעתרא קדישה הדין ודי בכל אתר ואתר. יהי להון ולכון שלמה רבה, חינה וכיסתה ורחמין, וחיין אריכין ומזונה רביחי, ופורקנה מן קדם עבורון דמשמיא והרע ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיא, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן.
רחל פשע בת פנחס ורבקה, יהי זכרה ברוך. שבת שלום. We did it.